From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. First, the headlines. Muslim staff in U.S. Congress calls for action against Islamophobia. Supreme Court allows Texas abortion ban and lawsuits to continue. People's Tribunal in London finds genocide committed against Uyghurs. Indian minister says Muslims should hand over Mathura mosque to Hindus. MPAC unveils new $10,000 grant earmarked for Black Muslim filmmakers. And now our top story tonight. U.S. Muslim congressional aides say Republican Lauren Boebert's recent Islamophobic comments against Congresswoman Ilhan Omar create a feeling of anxiety and fear. In an open letter to the House leadership Wednesday, the group said hateful rhetoric by public officials directly impacts us and puts our safety at risk. We feel that our workplace is neither safe nor welcome. The letter was signed by 62 Muslim House and Senate staff members and 378 allied staff. Omar, a Somali American, is one of the only 3 Muslim members of Congress. Supreme Court allows Texas abortion ban to continue, yet also allows the lawsuits against it to continue as well. The Supreme Court on Friday ruled that a lawsuit challenging the legality of Texas' new abortion ban can proceed. However, the Supreme Court also allowed the Texas law to remain in effect during that challenge. A coalition of 22 human rights and faith-based organizations sent a letter to the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, this week. This was for his refusal to designate India as a country of particular concern. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom noted the Indian government has been tolerating systemic, ongoing, and egregious religious freedom violations. That is as defined by the International Religious Freedom Act. The Commission, in its 2020 and 2021 annual reports, recommended the U.S. State Department declare India as a country of particular concern. Hindus for Human Rights and the Indian American Muslim Council admonished the U.S. government in a joint letter. They warned that ignoring rising religious persecution and human rights abuses in India undermines America's national security and strategic imperatives. Starbucks workers at a Buffalo, New York store voted to unionize despite the company's objections. The National Labor Relations Board said Thursday the workers voted 19-8 in favor of a union. The board is also counting votes for 2 other stores. If the Labor Board certifies the vote, it would be the first Starbucks-owned store in the U.S. to unionize in the company's 50-year history. It could inspire unionization efforts across the company's 8,000 U.S. stores. Starbucks has fought employee unionization for decades. The company says its stores function best when the company works directly with employees. Taliban interim government spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid told Anadolu agency the group has recovered millions of dollars from the homes of former government officials. Mujahid accused former government officials of shifting millions of dollars from the country. He said Taliban fighters recovered more than $20 million from the presidential palace and houses of former top officials of Ashraf Ghani's government. The money has been deposited in the Afghan Central Bank, Mujahid said. In August, the bank said it received more than $12 million in cash and gold bricks. Mujahid said that the U.S. froze its assets in August, causing an economic crisis in Afghanistan. He hoped Washington would release the funds soon after a recent meeting of Afghan Acting Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muqtati with U.S. officials in Doha, Qatar. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern spoke about the fragility of democratic systems in an address to a virtual democracy summit convened by U.S. President Joe Biden.
Our work, economic and social lives have been pushed online. This has accelerated digital transformation in exceptional, innovative ways. And it has also thrust many into an environment that can be isolating, unfamiliar, and lacking the social norms that govern offline behaviours. For some, it has deepened economic and social distance, highlighting problems of inclusion.
Some countries were barred from the summit for human rights abuses or vote rigging, but not all of them were. Hindu nationalist Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was invited, while the leader of NATO member Turkey, Tayyip Erdogan, was shunned. President Biden called on world leaders to make concrete pledges during the summit. The United States also promised $424 million worth of programs to help protect media freedoms, combat corruption, and support free elections globally. Medea Benjamin of the Peace and Justice organization Code Pink wrote in an op-ed that the U.S. claims to be a leader in global democracy while its own democracy is crumbling. She was referring to the January 6th insurrection in the U.S. Capitol. She also criticized inviting the State of Israel, an apartheid regime, to the summit. We'll be speaking with Medea later in the show. A London panel investigating alleged human rights abuses concluded yesterday that China committed genocide in the Xinjiang region, occupied East Turkestan, by preventing Uyghur births. 9 lawyers and human rights experts published their opinion after hearing allegations of torture, rape, and inhumane treatment at 2 evidence sessions this year. The tribunal was set up at the request of the World Uyghur Congress, the largest group representing exiled Uyghurs. It's been lobbying the international community to act against China over the alleged abuses.
Evidence from witnesses, fact witnesses, heard at the tribunal's hearings in June and September, which was largely accepted by the tribunal, show that in Xinjiang, at the hands of some part or parts of the PRC government and the CCP, hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs, with some estimates well in excess of 1 million, have been detained by PRC authorities without any or any remotely sufficient reason, and subjected to acts of unconscionable cruelty, depravity, and inhumanity.
An Indian minister in the state of Uttar Pradesh said on Tuesday that the Muslim community should hand over to Hindus a mosque close to a temple in the city of Mathura. Minister of State for Parliamentary Affairs Anand Swarup Shukla said that the white structure in Shri Krishna Janmabhoomi temple hurts the eye of every Hindu. Shukla, who is with the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party or BJP, called on Muslims to give up their claim on the land where he says Lord Krishna was born. Meanwhile, another BJP leader, Lakshmi Narayan Chaudhary, asked if the Krishna temple is not built in Mathura, will it be built in Lahore, referring to Pakistan. Many Indians believe the 1992 demolition of the Babri Masjid in the city of Ayodhya, which is also in Uttar Pradesh, strained Hindu-Muslim relations according to a nationwide poll. Close to 2,000 survey respondents, about 98%, said that the incident damaged relations between the two communities. Meanwhile, 59% of the respondents said tensions between the communities would heal with time, but nearly 39% said Hindu-Muslim relations were permanently damaged. Fitch Ratings says that the Luxembourg Islamic mutual funds industry's strong growth will continue in the short term to medium term. It is supported by the government's promotion of Luxembourg as a Western hub for Islamic finance as an international financial center. The Islamic MFI in Luxembourg has grown by 122% over the past 6 years. The country's favorable regulatory, legal, and tax framework supports the setup, administration, and cross-border distribution of Islamic funds. Luxembourg has 30 Sharia-compliant funds composed mostly of mutual funds. In contrast, Ireland has 16 Islamic funds, both mutual funds and exchange-traded funds, while the UK has about 5 funds, which are pension funds. The Muslim Public Affairs Council is accepting submissions for its newly launched Hollywood Bureau Filmmaker Grant, supporting Black Muslim filmmakers. The $10,000 grant is open to Black Muslims who are U.S. citizens or permanent residents and have an episodic, narrative, or animated project in development, production, or post-production. The grant is supported through the CAA Foundation and its Full Story Initiative, which is designed to generate more authentic and equitable storytelling in television and film. Hollywood Bureau Director Sue Obeidi said that the goal is to help Black Muslim creatives tell intersectional stories with nuanced depictions of Black Muslims on screen. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, where we dig deep into the Democracy Summit. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
I am what hunger looks like in America. I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch. Till September. I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs, and that's still not enough to put food on the table. I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. It's Human Rights Day, and here in the United States, the Democracy Summit is taking place that is being hosted by President Joe Biden. This seems to be an attempt to replace the United States as the leader of the free world, quote unquote. With us today, we have our friend and leader at Code Pink, Medea Benjamin. Thank you so much for joining us today, Medea.
Thank you for having me on.
The first day of the summit was yesterday, the Democracy Summit. What are your thoughts? What are the contradictions that you're seeing with the state of democracy right here in the United States and the hosting of this summit?
Well, that's the first thing that one sees is the issue of the lack of enough introspection on the part of the United States. I would think that if the Biden administration really took seriously the erosion of our democracy here at home, this would not have been a good time to do that summit where the U.S. picked and chose which countries around the world to invite and which ones not to invite. The ongoing problems of this country include a duopoly, a two-party system that doesn't leave space for other parties to come in and flourish and provide a full spectrum of views. It is a system that has been plagued by money in politics, that many countries around the world look at and scratch their heads to think, how could it be that Congress people have to spend hours of their day dialing for dollars in order to get reelected? And then you have the issue of gerrymandering, the polarization of the electorate, and the lack of faith by millions of people in the electoral system that we saw when Joe Biden won the election, and millions of people did and continue to think that that election was rigged. So a lot of contradictions when you look just at the state of affairs in the United States alone.
And also, yes, thank you so much for that insight here in the US. What about the United States' role in wars around the world, supplying dictators? Can you comment on that?
Yes, the United States is the #1 supplier of weapons and military training to dictatorships and repressive governments around the world. We have only to look at the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia, where it was just quashed in Congress an effort to stop the sale of $650 million to the Saudis to allow them to continue their war in Yemen and their repression internally, as well as their blockade of the Yemeni ports that has caused such malnutrition among children in Yemen. But that is only one. The U.S. is supplying weapons to countries like the Egyptian regime that has thousands and thousands of political prisoners languishing in their jails. The U.S. has given about $3.8 billion a year in military aid to Israel, which the human rights organizations around the world now have agreed is an apartheid state that systematically represses the Palestinian population. So when you look at U.S. dealings around the world, you see that when it comes to things like the arms trade or allyship with repression, the U.S. says one thing, but acts in a different way.
So a lot of human rights organizations, especially minority rights organizations that are run by Indian Muslims, Indian Christians, are quite flabbergasted why President Modi was not only invited to the summit, but as he is helming the rise of authoritarianism in India, but they're also wondering what are the next steps. For example, this $30 million that the United States has committed to free media. How is any of that money even going to get into India when foreign exchange or foreign donations from any organization or government are so restricted in a place like India? What is India's role in this democracy summit?
The U.S. should be pressuring Modi and should have been doing it from a long time ago, but instead has really maintained a lot of support for his regime as it has moved closer and closer to authoritarian rule. And the fact that India and Modi were invited to the summit speaks volumes of the hypocrisy of the U.S. in the way it has allowed repressive regimes like India, like the Philippines, to be part of this summit while excluding others that don't have as bad a track record as India, for example. And yes, it is very strange to see not only the close ties with India, but also the U.S. championing journalists and the freedom to write and speak as a major tenet of U.S. policy, and yet look at the way India has been repressive of those who speak out against government policies.
Is the United States trying to create a foil to the United Nations, especially considering China's growing influence in the United Nations, its massive donations to the World Health Organization? So is this Democracy Summit and this ongoing club that is being formed, do you think it's a foil to the United Nations?
If this were indeed the right time to do a democracy summit, and maybe it is, it should have been organized by the United Nations. Nobody has elected or appointed Joe Biden to be leader of the world. And this idea of the, quote, free world, our allies versus the rest of them, is precisely the opposite of what is needed in the time of a pandemic and in the time of climate crisis, both of which cry out for international cooperation, and the UN should be the venue for that. So for one country, because it is powerful, because it is wealthy, to step forward and say, we are going to determine who is with us and who is against us, is really at odds with what the people of the world need right now. Also, the U.S. not only is a supplier of military weapons around the world, but it is the largest military by far, more than the 10 next nations combined. The fact that the Congress is just passing an obscene budget of $758 billion at a time when we are debating a much, much smaller sum to provide basic services to our people, such as childcare and an affordable education for college. Many other countries look at this and say, we don't think that model is one that we should be copying. So in response to your question, again, I think, yes, the U.S. is trying to create an alternative venue to the United Nations to discuss these critical issues of human rights and democracy, but is not it should not be the one to do it, and is doing it in such a clumsy and divisive atmosphere that it will only backfire and create more division among nations, and probably will strengthen the hand of authoritarian regimes to crack down even more on their people.
Thank you so much, Medea, for being here and highlighting these contradictions. We'll be keeping an eye on this Democracy Summit, and apparently there's going to be another Democracy Summit a year from now, where benchmarks have been set, and these countries are going to be judged on or evaluated on those benchmarks. So let's see where this goes.
Final quick thing is to say that the U.S. should free Julian Assange, the journalist in the UK that the U.S. wants to extradite and put in prison for up to 175 years for exposing U.S. war crimes. If we really support democracy and human rights, Julian Assange would be free.
Thank you so much. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.